Greetings everyone from the Boise show. Tonight on BT's Fly Tying Friday, I'm going to be using the identical materials to produce a couple of flies. Here's a parachute tied with moose, calf, and dubbing, and of course thread and a hook and all the normal stuff. And I'll be tying it for you and the people here in the audience. And we're going to start with the parachute, and you can see that's it right there. I'll set that down, pick up a hook, and put it in the vise. And I'm tying with a size 12 tonight. And I wish we could make it closer for you, but for right now, you're just going to have to live with what we got and the conditions that we have here. But anyway, I'm going to grab my thread, which is Danville. I happen to have gray here, but it's Danville 60 or 70 denier, whichever case you want to call it. And let me slip on my spare glasses, and we'll start 1/3 back from the hook eye on the shank. And for those of you who don't know what I mean by that, the shank is a section of hook from the eye to where the bend starts. It's a flat section of hook, and I divide it into thirds, with from the front to the first third, the second third, and the final, and we're at the 1/3 point right now, back from the hook eye. And I'm going to wrap to the bend of the hook, and then back to the center of that thread application. So right about there. Now I'm going to capture a bundle of this moose hair. I'll just reach off camera and cut that, and you'll be able to see what we've got here. And I'm going to get rid of the waste, which is right down in here. And I'm going to do that not by pulling on the hair fibers and to get that trash out of there. That will create static electricity and make it difficult to stack the hair. Instead, I'm going to run my finger rapidly up and down through the waistband there to knock that out. And what that does is it eliminates the need, or eliminates static electricity. Now I'm going to place this in my hair stacker. And for those of you who have joined us before, you'll notice that I'm using not one of my regular hair stackers, but one of the ones that's in my travel tying kit. Too many people like the ones that I use at home, so I never take them to a show with me. I know, I'm joking, come on. But anyway, I've stacked that hair, have it all evened up, and I'm going to tie it on the shank so it's about equal to, the shank length. And the shank length, you remember, is the flat part of the hook. I'll just set that right in there. Now I want you to notice that I've got that hair slightly above the hook, and then I rock it down so it's on my side of the hook, away from you unfortunately, but on my side of the hook, so that I can use thread torque to take it from my side of the hook and reposition it to the top of the hook while tightening the thread. And we'll just wind that in place and trim that off and advance forward to the 1/3 point. And I want to get a little bit of this calf tail out here. I'm going to have a lot more garbage in that to get rid of. As you can see, there's a lot of trash in that. So I'm going to again rapidly run my finger up and down through the waist ends. Get rid of that. Put it into the hair stacker. A lot of people ask why I put it in backwards. As you can see, until I messed with it, it was cut even, and that part is a lot easier to line up and get into the stacker. The uneven, unstacked part is more difficult, but most people try to put that end in, and it's whatever you want to do. Now I'm going to flip this around so that the hair is pointing in the direction that I'm going to use it. And that means it's pointing towards the front of the hook. Now I'm going to measure this for length equal to the shank.
It was so bad.
Hold it in the pinch of my fingers and bind it to the top of the hook. And I'll just bind that in place. Now I'm getting ready to trim this, and if you trim your hair, just reaching in and clipping like that, you'll end up with a lump that is tough to cover up, and once it gets wet, it'll show through whether you cover it up well or not. But if you'll reach in from, I'm going to reach in from your side, lay it flat along the hook shank, and cut it so it's at a very severe angle. Now what that does is tapers the waist from the wing into the waist from the tail, so I get a nice taper to the body. And if my underbody is nice and smooth, it's going to make a lot nicer outer body. I'm going to stand that wing up by wrapping a thread dam that's in front of those hair fibers.
Come up off the ground when you try to drive into town.
And I need to wrap around this parachute post now to build a platform for my hackle. And I'm going to just turn this upside down, kind of at an angle, and just wrap up that post a ways. Go straight from the top of the post down to the hook shank. And what I'm doing is installing rebar in my wraps of thread. That the up and down strands of thread with the round and around strands of thread make for a very sturdy parachute platform. All right, there we are. Now I'm going to get some dubbing wax, and that's BT's dubbing wax. You'll find it on our website, btsflyfishing.com. And I'm going to just cover that pretty well. A section that is probably, I don't know, 5 inches, 6 inches in length. And I want to make sure that I don't have any big globs of wax on the thread, because that'll make a real mess. Now I'm going to use some of BT's soft touch dubbing. And I'm going to use the touch method of applying it to the hook, to the thread, and then subsequently to the hook shank. Now I have one little glob of wax I want to get rid of right there. And now I'm just going to touch this. You can see that wax is grabbing the dubbing out of the bundle and allowing it to stick there, and I get an even application along that thread. Okay, good. Now just twist in one direction only. I'm going clockwise in my direction when looking down from the top of the hook. And I'll go right to the end of the shank and then work my way forward, building the body till I get to the post. Now I'm going to need a little bit more there. I know that I will, so let me add to it right now before I go any further. And again, I'll just touch it to the thread. Okay, good. Now I'm going to strip off my hackle and place that in front of the post and bind it in place while I finish dubbing the body. The thread's still there, so I don't need to take the dubbing off or anything. I'll just continue dubbing front and behind the post, making sure that my last turn is behind the post. Now I'm going to turn this over one more time and wrap to the top of the post, pull the hackle up and bind it to the top of the post, and then wrap to the bottom of the post. What that does is anchor the feather to the wing. I have a wild hair here. I'm just going to get rid of that right now. There we go. Now I'm going to wrap this starting up at the top of my parachute post, wrapping towards the bottom. I hope this is coming through in the audio area for you all, because the show is busy and it's very, very noisy right now. Anyway, I am binding the hackle to the post by wrapping around twice. Now I want you to see that I'm going to flip this over and show you. I'm going to actually make my last turn between the feather and the body. It kind of pulls that up in line. I'll take my half hitch tool and I'll place one half hitch in, and then I'll follow with a whip finish, which is 2 turns. And we'll just cut that off, cut off the feather. And there you have a parachute, and let's call it a parachute green drake. Okay, well, so much for that. We're going to make a totally different fly now out of all the same materials. So how are we going to do that? Well, we're going to start with another hook, a number 12. And I'll place that in the hook. Again, the same thing. I'm going to move back slightly further on the hook shank, just slightly forward of the halfway point, and start wrapping a thread base. And I'll come back almost to my starting point in the more or less center of the hook. Now again, we're going to use tail made from the moose body hair.
Their dad or grandfather, I can't remember.
And I'll just cut some out of that bundle. And again, we'll just clean the waist out, just like we did before. And slip that into the hair stacker.
They're building 800 homes.
And now again, I want a tail that is about as long as the hook shank. So I'll just measure that for length, set it in place, and bind that on.
Tamarac's on its feet. It's been doing pretty good.
Alrighty. Now I'm going to trim off that waist. And now I'm at the crossroads. Before I installed the wing. Well, I'm not going to do that now. I'm instead going to put on the body. And again, I'm going to use some of the BT's dubbing wax. Remember, it's on our website, btsflyfishing.com.
I have 3 or 4 of them up there. They've been up there for like 2 years or something.
And the body section will be a little shorter than it was on the other, which covered the whole hook. This is only going to cover the back part of the hook.
Everything's just where it is, laying, and those coral traders.
I'll twist that in one direction only, which will be the clockwise direction when taken from the viewpoint of standing on top of the hook. And I'll just start right at the back of the hook and start working my way forward.
Push those roof bolts back up the jack and then hit them with hammers to make them set. Put the bow back in the roof.
All right, there we go. Now I'm going to advance the thread forward slightly into the bare area of the hook, and we'll take a piece of calf body hair, or calf tail hair, excuse me.
I can work on somebody else.
And again, we'll clean out the waist. And put it into the hair stacker. Now this time the wing is going to point back. Rather than out forward over the eye, it's going to point back. So I'm going to tie that on Trude style. By the way, in case you're interested, the name Trude came from a fellow by the name of A.S. Trude that was staying at the Harriman Ranch in on the Henry's Fork, and that's the wing style was named for him, and the original one was made out of a Irish setter fur. We're not using Irish setter right now, obviously, it's calf. But anyway, I'm going to set this thing, and I want that wing to be about as long as, well, so it'll end up in the middle of the tail. So I'll just tie that in place. Now I want you to notice that I'm going to kind of do the reverse of what we did on the wing before, only it'll be in the forward direction, but I'm going to still cut it at a very severe angle. And what that does is gives me a nice downward taper from back at the bulk of the body forward to the eye, where it's much smaller, and that'll give us a taper to the hackle platform, is what we call that.
So it works pretty good.
Alrighty, now let's get the brown hackle here, and I want you to notice that I've stripped the stem off, and I also want to take just a little bit more feather fibers off of one side of the stem than off of the other. Let me just kind of strip this out so you can see that this side has more fibers removed, and that's the side that's going to touch the hook, and it helps arrange those hackle fibers so they don't splay all over the place. Okay, let me trim off the waist of that stem, and now I'm just going to wrap forward, but I'm going to have a little problem right here where I made my trim. It's a nice taper all the way to the eye, but there's more of a drop off right there. We call that the cliff. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to back my thread up to the top of the cliff and use the weight of the bobbin on the thread to allow me to gradually move forward with those turns of hackle without having to slip down the hill. So there's the first turn, and those stripped off barbs on the one side make it a nice, even, clean turn. And I'll just come right up here. We're coming up on the hill. We're getting ready to drop down the hill, and now the weight of the bobbin is keeping that feather from slipping forward as I wrap forward to the hook eye. Therefore, I'll get a nice, clean, even application of hackle without having a slip there and having a blank space, if you will. Now I'm going to pull that hackle back, wrap my thread head, trim off the waist, set that down for future reference, grab my whip finish tool, this time instead of the whip finish, and this time instead of the whip finish tool, or the half-hitch tool, I'm using a whip finish tool. And I'll just place a 3 or 4 turn whip finish in there. Trim off the waist. And there you have 2 very different flies tied from the identical materials coming to you live from the Boise show. So folks, thank you so much for joining me. We'll see you next week on BT's Fly Tying Friday. Fred Dupre from Texas will be joining us to tie flies the warm water style. Join us and find out what we're talking about. Thanks for coming by.